Hello, everyone. Hope you all are doing good. Welcome back to the second part of the rise of nationalism in Europe. And the unit that we'll discuss today is the French Revolution and the idea of the nation. The topics that we'll discuss today are the changes after the French Revolution that created a sense of collective identity or sense of collective belonging or nationalism. Mission and destiny of the French nation to liberate the peoples of Europe, and the Civil Code of 1804 Napoleonic Code. Also, we'll discuss the mixed reaction towards the French rule. After the end of this video lesson, you would be able to evaluate the changes that created a sense of nationalism in France just after the French Revolution, explain Civil Code of 1804, and appraise the changes implemented by Napoleon in France. Before we move forward, it's important to have a recap of what you studied last year and a timeline of the different rules starting from 1789 till 1815. So you can see here in this flow chart that before 1789 there was monarchy of Bourbon dynasty in France, which was overthrown by the French Revolution in 1789, July 1789, and thereafter constitutional monarchy established in France. We all understand what constitutional monarchy is. It's a type of monarchy, or we can say type of democracy, in which the rule is done by a constitution and elected representatives. And king remains, however, the powers are quite limited or no power, just a symbolic head. Thereafter, in 1793-94, Jacobin government established under Maximilien Robespierre, and that was also termed as a reign of terror. Thereafter, in 1795, Directory rule started in France, and then in 1804, Napoleon established dictatorship in France. So we got this timeline. Before 1789, it was monarchy. After 1789, it was constitutional monarchy. Thereafter, 1793-94, Jacobin government, 1795, Directory rules, and 1804 to 1815, Napoleon's dictatorship. Now let's talk about changes after the French Revolution that created a sense of collective identity. A sense of collective identity or nationalism established in France with the changes that happened just after the French Revolution in 1789. We can see here the first point that says the ideas of La Patrie and Les Citoyens. Like we have the concept of Bharat Mata for the whole nation, and in the name of Bharat Mata, we get aligned together, and that creates an allegiance towards the nation, a connection towards the nation. Similarly, the idea of fatherland developed in France, and also the idea of citizen. Now people started thinking themselves about the citizen of France. Another change that happened was that formal royal standard, the flag, was replaced by a new tricolor French flag. Thereafter, we see that the Assembly of France, or the Court of France, which was Estates General, it was renamed to National Assembly. The other thing is that the composition of new hymns. So new hymns, new songs were were composed, and that created a feeling of nationalism among the French citizens. Oaths taken and martyrs commemorated in the name of nation. So, in the name of nation, the martyrs were felicitated, were praised, and paid homage. Other than this, some administrative changes also created a feeling of nationalism or a sense of collective identity in France. Centralized administrative system. So, the administrative system became centralized for the whole nation, and uniform laws were made. The next point is the internal custom duties and dues were abolished. So previously, like moving from one territory to another territories, people had to pay custom duties. Duty means tax, and the old dues which were present, they were all abolished after the French Revolution. That also created sense of collective identity. Adoption of uniform systems of weights and measures. So for the whole country, a uniform system, one system for the whole country for weights and measurement started and adopted. And the last but the most important, French became the common language of the nation. We see here. So, the whole country bound together with the language French. Now, let's talk about this illustration, this picture here. And this is the cover of a German almanac. We all understand almanac like your diary. That is an annual calendar containing important dates and events. It was designed by Andreas Rebmann in 1798. Okay, and in this almanac you can see these two pictures here. And the picture shows the French Bastille. The French Bastille being stormed by the revolutionary crowd has been placed next to a similar fortress meant to represent the bastion of despotic rule. So like you do remember, Bastille was a symbol of despotic rule. Bastille was the prisoner house of France under the monarchy, and it was termed as a symbol of despotic rule. Despotic rule, it means absolute rule, especially in a cruel and oppressive way. Similarly, the German fortress had been shown here, and that had also been represented as a symbol of despotic power. And this is of German province of Kassel. And accompanying the illustration is the slogan. You can see here, it's written here. The people must seize their own freedom. So it simply told the people to take inspiration from the French Revolution, how the revolutionary stormed the Bastille, the prisoner house. Similarly, it is required in Germany as well. The people must seize their own freedom. Rebmann lived in the city of Mainz and was a member of German Jacobin Club. So you can understand the importance of this illustration here, that other countries, other territories also got inspiration from the French Revolution. Now let's move forward. Let's talk about the mission and destiny of the French nation to liberate the peoples of Europe. So the French nation set up an example, and the mission and destiny was to liberate the peoples of Europe from despotism, that the whole Europe under despotism, under the uncontrolled rule, under the absolute rule of the monarchies, which were cruel and oppressive. They should be liberated. Liberated means freed, to help other peoples of Europe to become nations, to become a nation state, not different territories. And here the important word, as we discussed already, despotism is the exercise of absolute power, especially in a cruel and oppressive way. Now, the next topic that we need to understand is the spread of ideas of nationalism. Undoubtedly, the torchbearer was France. So, how the ideas spread across Europe, the ideas of nationalism spread across Europe started from France. The events in France reached different cities of Europe. So whatever happened in France, the information spread across Europe into the different cities of Europe. Jacobin clubs set up by students and educated middle class. So everywhere, like Jacobin clubs started during 1790s in France. So those revolutionary Jacobin clubs started getting set up in other parts of Europe as well by the educated middle class. Their activities and campaigns prepared the way for the French armies, which moved into Holland, Belgium, Switzerland, and much of Italy in the 1790s. And French armies were, during this period, entering in other territories of Europe, attacking to other territories of Europe, and they spread the ideas and Jacobin clubs set up everywhere. With the outbreak of the Revolutionary Wars, the French armies began to carry the idea of nationalism abroad, as we have already discussed, that the idea of nationalism emerged from France, and thereafter it carried forward to other territories of Europe. Now let's talk about one of the most important figure of the history, Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon Bonaparte, you can see the picture here, a French military leader and emperor. He was born on 15th August, very important date for us. That is our Independence Day. So he was born on 15th August 1769 at Corsica, and he died on 5th May 1821 at Longwood, St. Helena, UK. Seized political power in France in a 1719 coup d'etat. So a military coup, a military capture of power in France in 1799, and that was done by Napoleon. He got the power. He became the first consul of France. Thereafter, after 6 years, in 1804, he was crowned Emperor of France. He established dictatorship in France in 1804. He ruled till 1850, and he was defeated in the Battle of Waterloo in 1815 by the combined army of Britain, Russia, Prussia, and Austria. And thereafter he was captured and sent to exile, which was St. Helena, an island in UK, where he died at the age of 51. So that is all about the basic information of Napoleon Bonaparte. Now, Napoleon established dictatorship in France. However, Napoleon was an excellent ruler. He was an excellent administrator, And it's very important to understand what he did in France. The administrative changes that he did in France gave inspiration to other territories of Europe and to the entire world. And even today, will understand that his ideas and administrative reforms are relevant, and today also it is applicable. So Napoleon introduced several reforms, means changes he brought that corrected the system through a return to monarchy. Napoleon had no doubt destroyed democracy in France, but in the administrative field, he had incorporated revolutionary principles in order to make the whole system more rational and efficient. Undoubtedly, Napoleon established dictatorship not good. We do not consider dictatorship good. However, he made several changes and incorporated revolutionary principles, great changes that made the whole system rational and efficient. And even it is said that he established liberty under monarchy, which is a unique concept, because normally in a monarchy we don't find freedom. We can't think of liberty. However, it is said that under Napoleon in France, it was liberty under monarchy. He drafted Civil Code of 1804, or Napoleonic Code. The other name of Civil Code of 1804 was Napoleonic Code. It is Napoleonic Code because that was prepared by Napoleon. And this Civil Code of 1804 became the basis of administrative reforms in France. Let's talk more about it. The provisions of Civil Code of 1804 or Napoleonic Code. What different things were incorporated in the Civil Code of 1804? What were the provisions of Civil Code of 1804 or Napoleonic Code? This is one of the most important questions for your board examination. And the questions could be asked in several different ways. It may be asked about the changes done by Napoleon, or the provisions of Civil Code of 1804, or the provisions of Napoleonic Code, or it may be asked how Napoleon was a great administrator, justify the statement. It may also be asked that Napoleon established liberty under monarchy, how justify. So for all these questions, the answer would be the same. So what all Napoleon did, let's talk about it. He ended the privileges based on birth. As you do remember that in France, the society classified into different estates or groups or classes: first estate, second estate, and third estate. And the first estate that included clergy and the second estate that included nobility had several privileges, and based on those privileges they were exempted with taxes even, and they had n number of privileges. But what Napoleon did, Napoleon ended all the privileges based on birth. So he established that there should not be any privilege given to anyone. And in this way, we see that he established equality before law. So in France, equality before law established. And other thing is here, right to property. He gave right to property to the people. And Other than this, he simplified administrative divisions so that administration could be easier, and that was also a remarkable change. Abolition of feudal system, right? Feudal means feudal system means the system of land in which the peasant worked and the feudal lords or the landowners extract taxes. So that system ended by the Civil Code of 1804 or ended by Napoleon. Freedom of peasants from serfdom and manorial dues. So the peasants and the serfs means servants who were meant to serve. Those servants or the practice of serfdom ended by Napoleon and they were freed, and even the peasants were also freed from manorial dues. Manors were the big lands, and the dues on the peasants were exempted by, and in fact completely exempted, freed by Napoleon. And that created a sense of liberty among the common people, among the peasants. The next thing what he did was the removal of guild restrictions. I believe you do remember when I discussed the age of industrialization that guilds were the association of producers or the association of businessmen, and those guilds were extremely strong, and they in fact stopped other people from doing business in towns or in particular regions. So those restrictions that the guilds put, those restrictions were removed by Napoleon. Other remarkable thing which Napoleon did, Napoleon was quite particular about economy, and for economic development he improved transport and communication system, because we all know that transport and communication system is extremely important for improvement in economy, and that was done by Napoleon. Other important changes that we have found after the French Revolution as well, that he implemented uniform laws for the whole country. He standardized weights and measures. The weighing system and the measurement system were standardized, and a common national currency for the whole country. Previously, there had been different currency for different territories because they were not like one combined nation state. However, under Napoleon, he gave a common national currency for the whole country. Thus, we see here by all these points very clearly that Napoleon was a great administrator, and Napoleon brought remarkable changes that gave liberty to the people and led to the economic development of France. Now, let's talk about the next topic, which is mixed reactions of the local population to the French rule. As we have discussed about Napoleon, that his rule was excellent. He was an excellent ruler. So how was the reaction of the local people? What people felt about Napoleon's rule under the French rule, the other territories where Napoleon established its rule, because we all know that Napoleon wanted to become a dictator of Europe. He wanted to become a conqueror of Europe. That was his dream. And by giving an excellent rule in France, people in other territories were also quite attracted towards the French rule. So when Napoleon was attacking in the other territories like Holland, Switzerland, as well as in certain cities like Brussels, Mainz, Milan, and Warsaw, the French armies who attacked on these cities, they were surprisingly welcomed by the people, because people considered the French armies as harbingers of liberty. Very important keyword here. Harbingers or messengers of liberty. So they were considered as messengers of liberty. So people in these cities, they thought that if French rule would be established in their territories, then they would also experience a great rule under Napoleon, because they have heard about the changes in France that had been implemented, and they were considering the French armies as harbingers of liberty. They considered that the French armies they considered French armies as harbingers or the messengers or the carriers of liberty, that they are bringing liberty to their territories, and hence, surprisingly, they started welcoming the French armies or welcoming the rule of Napoleon. However, the initial enthusiasm, as the excitement was there about the French rule, turned to hostility. Hostility means when you are against something. So initially they were attracted towards French rule. However, it turned to hostility, as it became clear that the new administrative arrangements did not go hand in hand with political freedom. Because what they thought about the new administrative arrangements, they did not transfer in that way what they expected. And there were few reasons specifically that made people hostile to Napoleon: increased taxation, censorship, and forced conscription into the French armies required to conquer the rest of Europe, all seemed to outweigh the advantages of the administrative changes. Although the administrative changes were implemented, however, these things, these key points that we have seen here, they outweighed the administrative changes. All the good things now became unimportant because of the increased taxation. People were quite dissatisfied and became hostile to Napoleon's rule because of increased taxation and censorship, which is quite common. Censorship is quite common under any monarchy or dictatorship. So we all understand the meaning of censorship. When you don't have freedom of press, when you don't have freedom of expression, that is censorship. So nobody was allowed to say anything against or write anything against Napoleon. So, or against rule, against any mismanagement, against any misrule. So people got dissatisfied because they were unable to say anything. And then the other thing, as Napoleon wanted to become the conqueror of Europe, and hence he wanted to have armies. So the forced conscription into the French armies made people hostile to Napoleon, means people were forcefully taken into armies, and that made people dissatisfied and hostile to Napoleon's rule. Now, let's talk about the reasons for the welcome of Napoleon's army in conquered territories. As we have already discussed those points here, now what I have done, I have separated both the parts. So, like we have seen, the reaction was mixed. People liked, people disliked. Now, here we'll talk about the reasons for the welcome of Napoleon's army in conquered territories. Why people welcomed Napoleon's army. In places such as Holland, Switzerland, Brussels, Mainz, Milan, and Warsaw, the French armies were welcomed because French armies considered as harbingers of liberty, as we have already discussed, and there was an expectation, people expected, of a newfound freedom as the people in France were experiencing. So, what people experienced in France, that was expected in the other territories, and also expectation of administrative reforms like what happened in France. So we can see here clearly why people welcomed Napoleon's army. Now, very simply, we have already discussed all these keywords here. So the reasons behind hostility to Napoleon's rule: increased taxation, censorship, and forced conscription into the French armies led to the hostility towards Napoleon. Now look at this picture, and this picture is an excellent illustration by Karl Caspar Fritz, and the picture named as "The Planting of Tree of Liberty in Zweibrücken, Germany." So you can see here in this illustration by Karl Caspar Fritz that it seems that people are hoisting a flag or a tree of liberty, means freedom. And it is a sarcasm here. It is sarcastic. When we say sarcastic, means something which is shown to mock something, to oppose something. So that is shown here in this picture. And this picture was presented after the occupation or after the establishment of French rule in the city of Zweibrücken, Germany. And you can see the French soldiers in their blue, white, and red uniforms. They all have been shown as oppressors. You see here, they are oppressing people, they are suppressing people. They are so cruel, they are shown cruel. And there, you can see some examples here that they seize a peasant's cart, left. You see here, peasant's cart had been seized, harass some young women at center, right? And force a peasant down to his knees, right? So all these shows suppression by the French armies. And in this, a plague has been shown here. You see here. And it is a sarcasm. And it is said, "Take freedom and equality from us, the model of humanity." They are saying that take freedom and equality from us. That is an ironical statement here. It is irony. It is just opposite of what French armies were portrayed earlier, what had been expected. Like, take freedom and equality from us, the model of humanity, which is freedom and equality. Take it from us. It's a sarcastic comment or a taunt because the French armies were considered as liberator who will give liberty, but on contrast, on opposite to it, just opposite here, they were taking liberty. They were in fact suppressing people. So that is the sarcasm that is shown here in this excellent illustration by Karl Caspar Fritz. Very important name here. The illustration of the planting of trees of liberty in Zweibrücken, Germany by Karl Caspar Fritz. Now let's move ahead to the next picture here, and that is of Napoleon. So Napoleon wanted to be the conqueror of Europe, and he was winning everywhere. But here, this picture is shown here, and in this picture, Napoleon is represented as a postman. The courier of Rhineland loses all that he has on his way home from Leipzig. So here it is shown that Napoleon is going back, and because of a defeat, because he lost the Battle of Leipzig in 1813. And as he is going back, you see here all the leaflets here, right? And dropping out of his bag bears the names of the territories he lost. And all these are shown, all these papers are showing, or all these letters are showing the territories Napoleon lost. So this picture shows the retreat or going back of Napoleon, and in this all the different territories shown dropping from his bag. Okay, that's all about today in this video lesson. Thank you for listening and concentrating, understanding the topic. Now, just to test your understanding, this question is, which of the following was not the reason behind the hostility towards Napoleon? Is it increased taxation, conservatism, censorship, or forced conscription? So these four options are there. So which of the following was not the reason behind the hostility towards Napoleon? Please write the answer in the comment box. Now these are the assignment questions for you. All the assignment questions are very simple once you understand the topic, and everything had been discussed here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day ahead. Thank you. Bye now.